The whiskey-soaked laughter of 6 cattlemen echoed through the rusty Spur Saloon in Montrose, Colorado, as they slapped down their money on the scarred oak table. Each man convinced that rancher Nathan Jameson would die a bitter old bachelor before he ever found himself a wife. Nathan stood at the bar nursing his drink, pretending not to hear the commotion behind him, though every word cut deeper than they knew. It was March of 1882, and spring had arrived with false promises of new beginnings. The snow had melted from the valley, revealing the brown grass and mud beneath, and Nathan's prospects seemed just as barren. At 29 years old, he had built one of the most successful cattle operations in the Uncompahgre Valley through sheer determination and backbreaking work. But his personal life remained as empty as the bottles lining the shelves behind the bar. 3 months, declared Tom Richardson, a neighboring rancher whose potbelly strained against his vest. I give him 3 months to find a woman willing to put up with his stubborn hide, and if he cannot do it, he pays each of us $50. Make it interesting, chimed in Walter Green, his weathered face creasing into a grin. If he does manage to find himself a wife within 3 months, we each pay him $100. The other men muttered their agreement, their voices rising in volume as the whiskey flowed more freely. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. He had worked alongside these men, helped them during harsh winters, loaned them money when times were tough, and yet they sat behind him placing bets on his loneliness as if it were nothing more than a horse race. He turned slowly, his broad shoulders squared, and walked toward their table. The laughter died down as 6 pairs of eyes met his steady gaze. Nathan was not a man given to outbursts or dramatic displays, but something in his expression made even the drunkest among them shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You gentlemen seem awfully confident in my failures," Nathan said, his voice low and even. "I accept your wager." Tom Richardson's eyebrows shot up. "You are serious?" 3 months starting today, Nathan replied. "I will find a wife, a real marriage, not some arrangement of convenience, and when I do, each of you will pay me $100 and apologize for your disrespect." He did not wait for their response before turning on his heel and walking out into the cool March evening. The sun had begun its descent behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to mock his dark mood. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, waited patiently at the hitching post. Nathan swung into the saddle and urged the horse toward home, his mind already spinning with the impossible task he had just committed himself to. The ride back to his ranch took nearly an hour, giving him plenty of time to question his impulsive decision. The truth was, Nathan had tried to find a wife. He had courted 3 different women over the past 5 years, each courtship ending in rejection. The first had found him too serious, the second too consumed with his work, and the third had run off with a silver miner who promised her adventure and excitement. After that last failure 2 years ago, Nathan had thrown himself entirely into building his ranch, convincing himself that cattle were far more reliable than human hearts. His ranch house came into view as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. It was a modest 2-story structure he had built with his own hands, solid and functional but lacking the warmth of a true home. The barn and outbuildings stood in neat order beyond it, and in the distant pastures he could see the dark shapes of his cattle settling down for the night. Everything he had worked for spread out before him, and yet it all felt hollow without someone to share it with. Inside, he lit a lamp and sat down at his desk, pulling out a piece of paper and a pencil. If he was going to find a wife in 3 months, he needed a plan. He could not rely on the limited selection of women in Montrose, most of whom were already spoken for or had already rejected him. He needed to cast a wider net. The mail-order bride advertisements had always seemed desperate to him, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He began to write, choosing his words carefully. He would be honest about who he was and what he could offer, nothing more and nothing less. If a woman could not accept the truth, then she was not the right woman for him. The next morning, Nathan rode into town and posted his advertisement to 3 different newspapers in Denver, St. Louis, and Kansas City. The words were simple and straightforward. Successful cattle rancher in Montrose, Colorado, seeks wife. Must be hardworking, honest, and willing to embrace ranch life. Comfortable home and financial security provided. Respond with letter of introduction. Then he waited. Days turned into a week, then 2. Nathan threw himself into his work, repairing fences, checking on his herd, and preparing for the spring calving season. His foreman, a grizzled cowhand named Pete who had been with him since the beginning, noticed his distraction but said nothing. Pete had been there through all 3 failed courtships and knew better than to pry into Nathan's personal affairs. 3 weeks after posting the advertisements, the first responses began to arrive. Nathan sat at his kitchen table one evening with a stack of 7 letters, his heart beating faster than he cared to admit. He opened them one by one, reading each carefully. The first woman wrote with perfect penmanship about her love of fine things and city life, clearly hoping a rancher meant wealth and leisure. Nathan set that aside immediately. The second was a widow with 6 children under the age of 10. While Nathan admired her situation, he knew he was not ready to become an instant father to half a dozen youngsters. The third letter was so poorly written he could barely decipher it. The fourth came from a woman who admitted she was fleeing debts in St. Louis. The fifth was promising until he reached the part where she mentioned she could not abide animals of any kind, which would make ranch life rather difficult. He was beginning to lose hope when he opened the 6th letter. The handwriting was clear and confident without being overly fancy. It read, "Mr. Jameson, my name is Margaret Rose, and I am writing to you from Kansas City, Missouri. I am 26 years old and have worked for the past 8 years as a schoolteacher. While I have enjoyed my profession, I find myself yearning for a different life, one with more connection to the land and the natural world. I grew up on a small farm in eastern Kansas and am no stranger to hard work. I am honest, perhaps to a fault, and while I cannot promise to be the perfect wife, I can promise to be a faithful partner and friend. If you are interested in corresponding further, I would welcome your response. Sincerely, Margaret Rose." Nathan read the letter 3 times, then carefully set it aside and opened the 7th. That one was from a woman who spent 2 pages listing her demands and expectations, including a staff of servants and a trip to San Francisco twice a year. He added it to the rejection pile and picked up Margaret's letter again. There was something genuine in her words, an honesty that matched his own. He appreciated that she had not made grand promises or painted herself as something she was not. That evening he composed a response, telling her more about his ranch, the landscape of Colorado, and the realities of the life he could offer. He was careful not to mention the bet or his deadline, not wanting to pressure her or make her feel like a means to an end. He mailed the letter the next day and tried not to count the hours until a response might arrive. Spring was fully upon them now, and the ranch demanded his full attention. The first calves had been born, and he spent long days and nights checking on the herd, assisting with difficult births, and protecting the vulnerable newborns from predators. Pete and the 2 ranch hands Nathan employed seasonally worked alongside him, but the responsibility ultimately fell on his shoulders. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived from Margaret. She asked thoughtful questions about his daily routine, the climate, and what he sought in a marriage. She also shared more about herself, her love of reading, her close relationship with her younger sister who had recently married, and her desire to have a family of her own someday. Nathan found himself smiling as he read, imagining a woman who could discuss books with him in the evenings, who wanted children as much as he did. They exchanged 3 more letters over the following weeks, each one revealing more about the other. Margaret wrote with a dry sense of humor that surprised him, making wry observations about her students and the society ladies who looked down on working women. Nathan shared his frustrations with stubborn cattle and unpredictable weather, as well as his dreams of expanding his herd and maybe one day raising horses as well. As April drew to a close, Nathan realized he had less than a month left to fulfill the terms of the bet. He had grown genuinely fond of Margaret through their correspondence, but fondness expressed in letters was a far cry from marriage. He needed to meet her, to see if the connection they had built through words translated to real life. He wrote to her honestly about the bet, explaining the full situation and admitting his embarrassment at the circumstances. He told her he would understand if she wanted nothing more to do with him, but if she was willing, he would send money for a train ticket to Montrose. They could meet, spend some time together and see if they suited each other. If they did not, he would pay for her return ticket with no hard feelings. The week that followed was the longest of Nathan's life. He had laid himself bare in that letter, admitting his loneliness and the mockery of his peers. Part of him expected no response at all, or perhaps a polite rejection. Instead, a telegram arrived at the general store in Montrose with a message that made his heart leap. Arriving Montrose, May 15th. Margaret Rose. May 15th was 12 days before the 3-month deadline. Nathan spent the next 2 weeks in a frenzy of preparation. He cleaned his house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors that had not seen a proper washing in months. He bought new curtains for the windows and a colorful quilt for the guest bedroom. He repaired the porch steps and painted the front door. Pete watched all this activity with barely concealed amusement. "Never seen you in such a state, boss," Pete observed one afternoon as Nathan wrestled with hanging the new curtains. "This woman must be something special." "I hope so," Nathan admitted, stepping back to examine his work. "I truly hope so." The morning of May 15th dawned clear and bright. Nathan dressed in his best clothes, a clean white shirt and his good suit that he typically reserved for church on the rare occasions he attended. He hitched Copper to his wagon and drove into Montrose, arriving at the train station a full hour before the scheduled arrival time. The platform was nearly empty, just the station master and an elderly couple waiting for their son. Nathan paced back and forth, his nerves getting the better of him. What if she took one look at him and was disappointed? What if he had somehow misrepresented himself in his letters? What if the chemistry that seemed so real on paper was entirely absent in person? The distant whistle of the approaching train cut through his anxious thoughts. He stood at the edge of the platform, his heart pounding as the engine came into view, belching steam and smoke as it slowed to a stop. Several passengers disembarked, farmers and merchants and a young family with crying children. Then she stepped onto the platform, and Nathan forgot how to breathe. Margaret Rose was not a classic beauty by conventional standards, but there was something striking about her nonetheless. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5 feet 7 inches, with rich brown hair pulled back in a simple bun and intelligent hazel eyes that surveyed her surroundings with obvious interest. She wore a practical traveling dress in deep blue, and she carried a single worn carpet bag with an easy confidence that suggested she was accustomed to managing on her own. Their eyes met across the platform, and Nathan saw her expression shift from cautious evaluation to something that might have been relief. He walked toward her, his long strides eating up the distance between them. "Miss Rose?" he asked, though he somehow knew it was her. "Mr. Jameson," she replied, and her voice was warm with a hint of Kansas twang. "It is good to finally meet you in person." "The pleasure is entirely mine," Nathan said and meant it. "Was your journey comfortable?" "Long but uneventful, which is the best one can hope for on a train," Margaret said with a slight smile. "Though I must say, the scenery once we reached Colorado was spectacular. The mountains are even more impressive than I imagined." Nathan found himself returning her smile. "They have a way of putting things in perspective. May I take your bag?" She hesitated only a moment before handing it over. "I should warn you, I have more luggage. 2 trunks." "I will have them loaded into the wagon," Nathan assured her. "I thought we might get some lunch at the hotel restaurant before heading out to the ranch if you are hungry. Give us a chance to talk properly." "That sounds wonderful," Margaret agreed. As they walked toward the hotel, Nathan was acutely aware of the eyes watching them. Montrose was a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and his quest for a wife had been the subject of considerable gossip. He could see curtains twitching in windows and heads turning as they passed. Let them look, he thought with satisfaction. He had found a woman willing to give him a chance, and that was more than his doubting friends had predicted. The hotel restaurant was nearly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. They settled at a table by the window, and Nathan found himself studying Margaret's face in the better light. She had a scattering of freckles across her nose and laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often. There was a no-nonsense quality about her, a directness in her gaze that he appreciated. "I feel I should be honest with you right from the start," Margaret said once they had ordered their food. "I did not leave Kansas City solely for adventure or a desire to escape city life." Nathan's heart sank slightly. "What else prompted your departure?" "The school where I taught was run by a board of trustees," she explained. "One of those trustees, a married man, took what he perceived as an interest in me. When I rebuffed his advances, he made things difficult. He could not fire me outright without cause, but he made my position increasingly untenable. I chose to leave with my reputation intact rather than wait for him to manufacture a reason to dismiss me in disgrace." The honesty in her admission touched Nathan deeply. "Thank you for telling me. That must have been a difficult situation." "It was infuriating more than difficult," Margaret said with a flash of spirit in her eyes. "I am a good teacher. My students learned and thrived, but because one man could not accept rejection, I lost a position I had worked hard to earn. It made me realize that perhaps I had been seeking security in the wrong place. A woman alone, dependent on the whims of others for her livelihood, has very little real security at all. A wife on a ranch is still dependent on her husband in the eyes of the law," Nathan pointed out, wanting her to understand the full picture. "True," Margaret acknowledged, "but a wife is also a partner in building something together. That appeals to me more than being an employee whose livelihood can be threatened by the wounded pride of a small man." Their food arrived, and they ate in companionable conversation. Margaret asked him about his ranch, his cattle, his daily routine. Nathan found himself opening up in ways he rarely did, describing not just the practical aspects of ranch life, but also what he loved about it. The satisfaction of seeing a healthy calf take its first wobbly steps, the beauty of the valley at sunrise, the feeling of accomplishment that came from building something with his own 2 hands. Margaret listened with genuine interest. asking intelligent questions that showed she was truly considering what such a life would mean. When he asked about her teaching, her face lit up as she described her favorite students and the satisfaction of watching a child's understanding dawn when they finally grasped a difficult concept. "I will miss teaching," she admitted, "but I am ready for a new chapter. I want a home of my own, a family. I want to build something that cannot be taken away by the caprice of others." After lunch, Nathan loaded her trunks into the wagon and helped her onto the seat beside him. The ride out to the ranch would take about an hour, and he found himself grateful for the time to talk more. Margaret's presence beside him felt natural in a way he had not anticipated. She did not chatter nervously or sit in uncomfortable silence. Instead, she observed the landscape with obvious interest, commenting on the wildflowers beginning to bloom in the meadows and the way the mountains seemed to change color in the shifting light. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "Different from Kansas, but beautiful in its own way." "Wait until you see it in summer," Nathan said. "The whole valley turns green and the wildflowers cover the hillsides. Of course, it is also when the real work begins with haying and preparing for winter." "I am not afraid of work," Margaret assured him. "I grew up helping my father with the farm. I can milk a cow, tend a garden, and mend just about anything. I may not know cattle specifically, but I learn quickly." When the ranch house came into view, Nathan watched Margaret's face anxiously for her reaction. She studied it thoughtfully, taking in the sturdy construction and the well-maintained outbuildings. "It looks like a real home," she said finally. "Solid and honest, just like your letters." Something loosened in Nathan's chest at her words. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and helped her down. Pete emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers and eyeing Margaret with open curiosity. "Pete, this is Miss Margaret Rose," Nathan said. "Margaret, this is Pete Harrison, my foreman and the man who keeps this whole operation running smoothly." Pete touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Madam, pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Harrison," Margaret said warmly. "Just Pete, madam," he corrected with a grin. "Welcome to the ranch. I hope you find it to your liking." Nathan showed Margaret into the house, suddenly seeing it through her eyes and hoping his frantic cleaning had been thorough enough. She walked through the main room, taking in the simple furniture and the stone fireplace, then moved to the kitchen with its cast iron stove and handmade cabinets. "You built all this yourself?" she asked, running her hand along the smooth wood of the table. "Most of it," Nathan confirmed. "Pete helped with the barn raising and I hired a few men for the heaviest work, but the house is largely my doing." "It is impressive," Margaret said sincerely. "You can see the care that went into it." He showed her the guest bedroom where she would stay, freshly cleaned with the new quilt spread across the bed. "I want you to feel comfortable here, to take your time getting to know me and the ranch before making any decisions. There is no pressure, Margaret. If you decide this is not the life for you, I will understand." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Nathan, may I be frank with you? I would prefer it. I did not travel all this way on a whim," she said. "I am 26 years old and I know my own mind. I am not a girl who needs weeks of courting to understand what I want. Your letters were honest and thoughtful. You have been respectful and kind in person. This ranch, this life you have built, it is exactly what I told you I was seeking. So while I appreciate your consideration, I think we should be honest with each other about our intentions." Nathan found himself smiling. "What are your intentions, Miss Rose?" "I came here to see if we would suit each other for marriage," she said directly. "If you are the man your letters suggested, and if this is truly the life you described, then I believe we would suit each other very well. But I need to know if you feel the same, or if you were simply looking for any woman to satisfy the terms of your bet. The question was fair, and it deserved an honest answer. Nathan took a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. When I first posted those advertisements, I will admit I was motivated primarily by the bet and my wounded pride, he said. But Margaret, reading your letters, getting to know you through your words, something changed. I found myself looking forward to your responses, thinking about things you had written, wondering what you would think about something I had seen or experienced. Meeting you today has only confirmed what I began to suspect weeks ago. I want to marry you not to win a bet, but because I believe we could build something good together. The directness in her gaze softened into something warmer. Then I think we should proceed with that plan. You are certain? Nathan asked, hardly daring to believe it could be this simple. I am certain, Margaret confirmed. Though I would like a few days to settle in, to see the ranch properly and to be absolutely sure. But unless something dramatic changes in that time, I believe we should marry as soon as it can be arranged. Nathan felt a grin spreading across his face. The bet deadline is May 27th. That gives us 12 days. Then let us aim for May 26th, Margaret said with an answering smile. No sense in cutting it too close. Over the next few days, Margaret proved herself to be everything her letters had suggested and more. She rose early without complaint, helping Nathan with the morning chores and learning the rhythms of ranch life with impressive speed. She had not exaggerated her farming background. She knew her way around animals and was not squeamish about the messier aspects of ranch work. Pete took to her immediately, appreciating her willingness to learn and her good humor in the face of setbacks. When a cow kicked over a milk pail Margaret had just spent 20 minutes filling, she simply laughed and started over, commenting that the cow clearly had opinions about her milking technique. But it was the quieter moments that convinced Nathan he had made the right choice. Evenings when they sat on the porch together watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. The way she looked at his ranch not as a finished product, but as a work in progress, offering suggestions for a vegetable garden and asking thoughtful questions about his plans for expansion. The comfortable silences that fell between them, not awkward but peaceful. On the third evening, as they sat together after supper, Margaret asked the question Nathan had been expecting. Tell me about your previous courtships, she said. What went wrong? Nathan appreciated her directness. The first was when I was 23, just getting the ranch started. I courted the daughter of a merchant in town, Sarah Hendricks. She was pretty and seemed to enjoy my company, but when I proposed, she told me she could not marry a man who would always put his work before her. Looking back, she was probably right. I was consumed with building the ranch and I did not make much time for her. And the second, Margaret prompted. Emma Caldwell, a few years later. She was a widow and I thought we understood each other well. But she wanted to move to Denver to live in a city with more society and culture. She asked me to sell the ranch, and when I refused, she ended things. I could not blame her. We wanted different lives. The third, Nathan grimaced. Julia Preston. That one stung the most. We courted for nearly a year, and I thought we were building toward marriage. Then a silver miner came through town with grand stories of striking it rich in the mountains. She left with him without even saying goodbye. I heard later that he abandoned her in Leadville when his mine did not pan out. I am sorry, Margaret said quietly. That must have been painful. It was, Nathan admitted. But it also taught me something. I needed someone who wanted this life, who saw the value in what I am building here. Someone who would not see the ranch as an obstacle to overcome or a stepping stone to something else. And you think I am that person? Nathan turned to look at her in the fading light. I do. You understand what this life means because you grew up in it. You are not looking for ease or glamour. You want partnership and purpose. Am I wrong?" "You are not wrong," Margaret said. "I watched my mother work alongside my father for 30 years, building their farm into something they could be proud of. It was hard work, but they did it together, and there was joy in it. That is what I want. Not a husband who will put me on a pedestal or shower me with luxuries, but a partner who will work beside me to build something meaningful." "Then we are agreed," Nathan said. "We marry in 9 days." Margaret laughed, a warm sound that Nathan was already growing to love. "We are agreed." The next morning, Nathan rode into Montrose to make the arrangements. He stopped first at the small church on the edge of town, where Reverend Matthews greeted him with surprise. "Nathan Jameson, as I live and breathe," the elderly minister said. "I have not seen you in church in months." "I know, Reverend, and I apologize for that," Nathan said. "But I have a good reason for coming today. I need you to perform a wedding." The Reverend's eyebrows rose. "A wedding? And who is the lucky bride?" "Her name is Margaret Rose. She arrived from Kansas City a few days ago." "A mail-order bride." The Reverend's tone was carefully neutral. "We have been corresponding for weeks," Nathan explained. "She is a good woman, Reverend, a schoolteacher with a strong faith and a kind heart. I know it seems sudden, but I am certain this is right." Reverend Matthews studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Very well. When would you like to hold the ceremony?" "May 26th, if that suits you." "Consider it done," the Reverend said. "Will there be many guests?" Nathan considered this. "I had not thought much about guests." "Would you mind if we kept it small? Just a few witnesses." "Whatever you prefer, my boy. Marriage is about the commitment between two people before God, not the size of the celebration." His next stop was the general store, where he ordered supplies for a small wedding supper and some fabric Margaret had mentioned wanting for new curtains. Mrs. Dawson, the storekeeper's wife, pumped him for information about his intended bride with barely concealed curiosity. "I heard she arrived on the train from Kansas City," Mrs. Dawson said as she measured out the fabric. "Tall woman with brown hair." "That is correct," Nathan confirmed, not offering more information than necessary. "And you are really going to marry her, just like that?" "Just like that," Nathan said firmly. "She is everything I could have hoped for, Mrs. Dawson." The older woman softened slightly at his obvious sincerity. "Well then, I wish you both every happiness. Lord knows you have worked hard enough for it, Nathan. You deserve some joy in your life." His final stop was the land office, where he needed to file some paperwork for a property boundary dispute with a neighbor. As he emerged back onto the street, he nearly collided with Tom Richardson, the man who had started the whole bet. "Jameson," Tom said, his expression uncomfortable. "I heard you brought a woman back to your ranch." "I did," Nathan said evenly. "Her name is Margaret Rose, and we are marrying on May 26th. Tom's face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, chagrin, and finally resignation. "So you actually did it. You are really going to win this bet." "The bet is not why I am marrying her, Tom," Nathan said. "Though I will not pretend the money will not be useful. Margaret and I plan to use it to build a proper barn for horses. I am thinking of starting a breeding program." The older man had the grace to look ashamed. "Listen, Nathan, about that bet. We were drunk and foolish, and we had no call to make sport of your situation. I want you to know I am sorry for my part in it." Nathan considered holding on to his anger, but found it had dissipated over the past week. "I appreciate that, Tom, and truthfully, if you men had not made that bet, I might never have placed those advertisements. Sometimes good things come from unexpected places." "This woman, she makes you happy?" Tom asked. "She does," Nathan said simply. "She truly does." "Then I am glad for you," Tom said, extending his hand. And I will pay my $100 with a smile, knowing it is going to a good cause. When Nathan returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Margaret in the kitchen with her sleeves rolled up, making bread. Flour dusted her cheek and her hair was escaping its pins, and she had never looked more beautiful to him. "The wedding is set for May 26th, he announced. "Reverend Matthews will perform the ceremony." Margaret looked up with a smile that made his heart skip. "That is wonderful. Should we invite anyone?" "I thought we would keep it simple," Nathan said. "Pete as my witness, and perhaps we could ask Mrs. Dawson from the general store to stand up with you. She seemed genuinely pleased when I told her about the wedding." "That sounds perfect," Margaret agreed. "I am not one for big celebrations anyway. I would rather it be intimate and meaningful." Nathan crossed the kitchen to stand beside her. "Margaret, I want you to know that I am going into this marriage with my whole heart. This is not a business arrangement or a convenience. I care for you deeply, and I believe that caring will grow into something even stronger as we build our life together." She set down the bread dough she had been kneading and turned to face him fully. "I feel the same way, Nathan. I came here hoping for partnership, but I am finding something more. You are a good man, honorable and kind. I am proud to become your wife." The words hung between them, weighted with promise. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently brushed the flour from her cheek. Margaret's breath caught, but she did not move away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes searching his face. "May I kiss you?" Nathan asked softly. "I wish you would," Margaret replied. He bent his head and kissed her gently, a sweet pressure of lips that spoke of respect and growing affection. Margaret's hand came up to rest against his chest, and when they parted, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes bright. "We should probably wait until after the wedding for more of that," she said breathlessly. Nathan smiled. "Probably wise, but I am very much looking forward to after the wedding." The next week passed in a flurry of preparations. Margaret threw herself into making the house truly feel like a home, adding small touches that transformed the functional space into something warm and welcoming. She hung the new curtains, planted a small herb garden near the kitchen door, and arranged wildflowers in jars throughout the house. Nathan found himself watching her move through his home with a sense of wonder, hardly believing his luck. He also made his own preparations, having Pete help him build a proper bed frame for the main bedroom to replace his simple rope bed. He wanted everything to be right for his bride, to show her through actions as well as words how much he valued her presence in his life. 2 days before the wedding, Margaret surprised him by asking to learn to ride. She had never had much opportunity in Kansas City, and she wanted to be able to accompany him when he checked on the cattle in the far pastures. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "We can wait until after the wedding." "There is no rush." "I want to learn now," Margaret insisted. "I want to be useful, not just decorative." Nathan selected his gentlest mare, a buckskin named Daisy, and spent the afternoon teaching Margaret the basics of riding. She was fearless, taking spills with good humor and climbing right back into the saddle. By the end of the day, she was managing a decent trot around the corral, her face flushed with triumph. "This is wonderful," she called to Nathan. "I feel so free up here." Watching her ride with increasing confidence, her laughter ringing out across the ranch, Nathan felt the last of his doubts dissolve. This was the right choice. She was the right choice. The evening before the wedding, they sat together on the porch as had become their custom. The May night was warm and full of stars, and the air smelled of sage and new grass. "Are you nervous?" Margaret asked. "A little," Nathan admitted. "Not about marrying you, but about being a good husband. My own parents died when I was young, and I did not have the best example of what a marriage should be." "Tell me about them," Margaret said gently. Nathan rarely spoke of his parents, but something about the quiet night and Margaret's presence made the words come easier. My father was a hard man, stern and quick to anger. My mother was kind but worn down by life and by him. They did not seem to like each other much, if I am being honest. When they died in a wagon accident, I was 15 and already working on neighboring ranches. I have been on my own since then. I am sorry you lost them so young, Margaret said. But Nathan, you are not your father. The very fact that you worry about being a good husband tells me you will be. My parents had a good marriage, and I learned from watching them that the secret is simple: respect, communication, and a willingness to work together. If we have those things, we will be fine. We have those things, Nathan said with certainty. Then we will be fine, Margaret assured him. She reached for his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined as the stars wheeled slowly overhead. May 26th dawned clear and beautiful. Nathan woke early, too excited to sleep, and spent the morning making sure everything was perfect. He bathed and shaved carefully, then dressed in his best suit. Pete had volunteered to handle the morning chores so Nathan could focus on the wedding, and for once, Nathan did not argue. At 11 o'clock, they rode into Montrose together, Margaret in her best dress, a lovely gray silk she had brought from Kansas City. She had pinned her hair up in an elegant style, and she wore a simple silver necklace that had belonged to her mother. The church was small and plain, but someone had decorated it with fresh wildflowers. Reverend Matthews stood at the front in his formal robes, and Mrs. Dawson was already there, beaming with excitement at being included in the ceremony. Pete arrived moments later, his hair slicked back and his face scrubbed clean. "You clean up nice, boss," Pete said with a grin. "Could say the same about you," Nathan replied, surprised to find his hands were shaking slightly. Margaret arrived on Mrs. Dawson's arm, having agreed to let the older woman give her away since her own father was in Kansas. She walked down the short aisle with quiet dignity, her eyes locked on Nathan's face. When she reached him and took his hands, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him like a benediction. Reverend Matthews began the ceremony with a prayer, then addressed them both. "Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly. Nathan, Margaret, you come before God and these witnesses to pledge yourselves to each other in love and faithfulness. Do you do so with clear minds and willing hearts?" "We do," they answered in unison. The Reverend continued with the traditional vows, and Nathan spoke his clearly and firmly, meaning every word. "I, Nathan Jameson, take you, Margaret Rose, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Margaret's voice was equally steady as she repeated her vows, her eyes never leaving Nathan's face. "I, Margaret Rose, take you, Nathan Jameson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Nathan had purchased a simple gold band from the jeweler in town, and he slipped it onto Margaret's finger with hands that had stopped shaking. It fit perfectly. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews declared with a smile. "Nathan, you may kiss your bride." Nathan cupped Margaret's face in his hands and kissed her softly, aware of their small audience but lost in the moment nonetheless. When they parted, Margaret was smiling, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Hello, husband," she whispered. "Hello, wife," Nathan replied, and his heart felt so full he thought it might burst. They signed the marriage certificate with Pete and Mrs. Dawson as witnesses, making everything legal and official. As they emerged from the church into the bright May sunshine, Nathan saw a group of men waiting by the wagon. His heart sank slightly when he recognized Tom Richardson and the other 5 cattlemen who had made the original bet. "Here to gloat?" Nathan asked, instinctively moving slightly in front of Margaret. "Actually, we are here to congratulate you," Tom said, stepping forward, "and to pay our debts." One by one, the 6 men came forward, each handing Nathan $100 and offering genuine congratulations to the newlyweds. Walter Green, who had been one of the loudest in his certainty that Nathan would fail, was particularly gracious. "Mrs. Jameson," he said, tipping his hat to Margaret, "your husband is a good man who has earned everything he has through honest work. I am pleased to see him find happiness, and I apologize for my part in the foolishness that brought you together." Margaret surprised them all by laughing. "Mr. Green, I am not offended. Sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected sources. If that bet prompted my husband to place his advertisement, then I am grateful for it." The men relaxed visibly at her good humor. Tom Richardson stepped forward again, this time holding out an envelope. "The boys and I talked, and we want you to have this. It is a little extra, a wedding gift. We figure we owe you more than just the bet money for being such fools." Nathan opened the envelope to find an additional $300. "Gentlemen, this is too much." "It is not nearly enough," Tom said firmly. "Take it, Nathan. Buy your wife something nice or put it toward those horses you mentioned. Just accept it with our best wishes." Nathan found himself genuinely moved by the gesture. "Thank you, all of you. This means more than you know." After the men departed, Nathan, Margaret, Pete, and Mrs. Dawson went to the hotel for a celebratory lunch. It was a modest affair, but filled with laughter and good conversation. Mrs. Dawson regaled them with stories of other weddings she had witnessed in Montrose, some of which ended well and others quite disastrously. Pete shared tales of Nathan's early days ranching, when he had been more determination than skill. "He once tried to rope a calf and ended up hog-tying himself instead," Pete said with a grin. "Took me 10 minutes to get him free, and the calf just stood there watching like it was the best entertainment it had ever seen." Margaret laughed until tears ran down her cheeks, and Nathan could not even bring himself to be embarrassed. Seeing her so happy, so at ease with the people who would be part of their life together, filled him with contentment. After lunch, Pete tactfully suggested he would stay in town for the evening, giving the newlyweds privacy. Mrs. Dawson hugged Margaret warmly and whispered something in her ear that made the younger woman blush and smile. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was the comfortable silence of 2 people who did not need to fill every moment with words. Nathan found himself hyper-aware of Margaret beside him, of the gold band on her finger catching the afternoon light, of the fact that this remarkable woman was now his wife. When they reached the ranch, Nathan helped Margaret down from the wagon and then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Carrying my bride across the threshold," Nathan said. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house and set her gently down in the main room. Margaret looked around at what was now her home with obvious satisfaction. "It is perfect," she said softly. "All of it." They moved together naturally, no awkwardness or hesitation. Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly, no longer constrained by the need for propriety. Margaret responded with equal passion, her arms winding around his neck. "I love you," Nathan said when they finally broke apart. "I know it is fast and maybe I should have waited to say it, but it is true. I love you, Margaret Jameson." Margaret's eyes shone with tears and joy. "I love you too. I think I started to love you through your letters, and every day since I arrived has only deepened that feeling. You are everything I hoped for and so much more." That night, They consummated their marriage in the bedroom Nathan had so carefully prepared, coming together with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, lying in each other's arms as moonlight streamed through the window, Margaret traced patterns on Nathan's chest. "Tell me about your dreams for this ranch," she said. "Not just the practical plans, but the dreams. What do you see when you imagine the future?" Nathan thought for a moment before answering. "I see a thriving operation with cattle and horses both. I see pastures full of healthy animals and barns full of hay. I see hired hands who are treated fairly and stay because they want to, not just because they need the work. But most of all, I see a family. Children running through the yard, growing up knowing the land and loving it the way I do. I see us growing old together, watching our grandchildren learn to ride. I see a legacy built not just on hard work but on love." "That is a beautiful dream," Margaret whispered, "and I want to help you build it." "We will build it together," Nathan corrected. "Everything from this moment forward, we build together." As spring turned to summer, Nathan and Margaret settled into married life with surprising ease. They developed rhythms and routines, learning each other's habits and preferences. Margaret proved to be an invaluable partner on the ranch, not content to limit herself to traditional women's work. She helped with the cattle, learned to use a lasso with increasing skill, and had strong opinions about which breeding stock to keep and which to sell. Her vegetable garden flourished, providing fresh produce for their table and enough extra to sell in town. She also started keeping chickens, both for eggs and meat, and convinced Nathan to let her try her hand at cheese making. "If we are going to have extra milk from the dairy cows, we might as well put it to good use," she argued, and Nathan could not disagree. Pete became a close friend to both of them, eating supper with them most evenings and offering his opinion on ranch matters. He treated Margaret with the respect due a partner rather than just the boss's wife, which she appreciated. In July, they used some of the money from the bet and the wedding gifts to purchase their first breeding pair of horses, a magnificent stallion and 3 quality mares. Nathan had always loved horses, and the prospect of building a breeding program alongside the cattle operation excited him. Margaret took to the horses immediately, spending hours working with them and learning their personalities. "They are so intelligent," she marveled one evening as she groomed one of the mares. "I can see why you wanted to do this." "We can build something special here," Nathan said. "Give it a few years, and Jameson Ranch could be known throughout Colorado for quality horses." "Jameson Ranch," Margaret repeated thoughtfully. "We should make a sign, something proper to mark the entrance to the property." They spent a weekend designing and building a wooden arch over the main road leading to the ranch, with Jameson Ranch carved into it in bold letters. When it was finished and standing proud, they stood together admiring their handiwork. "Now it feels real," Margaret said. "Our ranch, our home, our life together." Nathan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "The realest thing I have ever known." In September, Margaret began feeling unwell in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to something she had eaten, but when the nausea continued for over a week, a different possibility occurred to her. She shared her suspicion with Nathan one evening as they prepared for bed. "I think I might be with child," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Nathan froze in the act of removing his boots. "Truly, I am not certain yet, but the signs seem to point that way. How do you feel about it?" Nathan crossed to her in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "How do I feel? Margaret, I am overjoyed. A child, our child. There is nothing that could make me happier." "Even though we have only been married for months?" she asked. "Some might say it is too soon." "Those people can mind their own business," Nathan said firmly. "We are married, we love each other, and we are building a life together, A child is a blessing, not a scandal. Margaret relaxed into his embrace. I am glad you feel that way. I am excited, Nathan. Scared too, but mostly excited. They rode into town the following week to see the doctor, who confirmed Margaret's suspicion. She was indeed pregnant, likely due to deliver in early April. Dr. Harrison was a kindly man in his 60s who had been practicing in Montrose for decades. You are healthy and strong, Mrs. Jameson, he assured her. I see no reason to anticipate any problems. Just take care of yourself, do not overtax your strength as the pregnancy progresses, and send for me when your time comes. The news spread through Montrose quickly, as all news did in a small town. Mrs. Dawson was delighted, insisting on hosting a small gathering for Margaret to celebrate the coming baby. Women from the community brought practical gifts, baby clothes they had sewn, blankets they had knitted, advice both solicited and unsolicited. Margaret bore it all with good grace, genuinely touched by the warmth of their welcome. She had worried about being accepted as an outsider, a mail-order bride with no history in the community, but the women of Montrose had embraced her wholeheartedly. As fall turned to winter, Nathan became increasingly protective of his wife. He tried to take over her heavier chores, much to her amusement. Nathan, I am pregnant, not fragile, she protested when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that she had been managing fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their work. I know that, Nathan said, but you are carrying my child, and I will not take any chances with either of your safety. Margaret softened at his obvious concern. I promise to be careful and to ask for help when I need it, but you have to trust me to know my own limits. I trust you, Nathan assured her. I just worry. Worrying is allowed, Margaret said with a smile. Expected even, but excessive hovering will drive me to distraction. They found a balance, Nathan reining in his protective impulses, and Margaret being honest about when tasks became too difficult. As her belly swelled with their growing child, they spent evenings discussing names and plans for the future, imagining the life their son or daughter would have. Winter that year was mild, with less snow than usual and temperatures that rarely dropped below freezing. The cattle did well, and the horses settled into their new home beautifully. One of the mares was pregnant too, having been bred before Nathan purchased her, and was due to foal in the spring. Christmas was their first as a married couple, and they celebrated quietly at the ranch with Pete joining them for a feast Margaret prepared despite Nathan's protests that she should rest. Cooking brings me joy, she insisted. And I am not going to stop doing things I love just because I am pregnant. Besides, I want to start traditions with our family, and what better tradition than a proper Christmas dinner? They exchanged simple gifts, practical things they needed for the ranch, but given with love and thought. Nathan had carved a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and painting it with a protective finish. Margaret cried when she saw it, hormones and genuine emotion combining. It is perfect, she said, running her hands over the smooth wood. Our baby will sleep in something made by their father's hands. What could be better? In return, she gave him a vest she had sewn from soft leather, with intricate stitching along the edges. For cold mornings when you are out checking the herd, she explained. I want you to stay warm. That night, as they lay in bed with Nathan's hand resting on Margaret's swollen belly, they felt the baby move for the first time. A flutter, then a distinct kick against Nathan's palm. Did you feel that? Margaret asked breathlessly. I did, Nathan said, his voice full of wonder. Our child. So real, so alive. We made this, Margaret marveled. Out of love and hope, we made this new life. Nathan kissed her softly. Best thing I ever did was place that advertisement. Best decision I ever made was saying yes when you stepped off that train." "We were lucky to find each other," Margaret agreed. "But I think we also chose each other, consciously and deliberately. That makes it even more special." As winter gave way to early spring, Margaret's pregnancy advanced and she grew more uncomfortable. She could no longer ride or help with the heavier ranch work, which frustrated her independent nature. Nathan tried to keep her occupied with lighter tasks and planning for the baby, but she chafed at the restrictions. "I feel like a useless lump," she complained one afternoon in late March as she struggled to find a comfortable position in their rocking chair. "You are growing our child," Nathan reminded her. "That is the most important work either of us is doing right now." "I know that intellectually," Margaret sighed. "But I am used to being active and productive. Sitting around waiting is torture." Her discomfort grew over the next week, false labor pains coming and going, keeping them both on edge. Nathan made sure Pete knew to be ready to ride for the doctor at a moment's notice. On April 3, 1883, just as dawn was breaking over the mountains, Margaret woke Nathan with a hand on his shoulder. "It is time," she said calmly, though he could see the tension in her face. "The pains are regular and getting stronger." Nathan was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his clothes and fighting down the panic rising in his chest. "I will get Pete to fetch the doctor. You just breathe and try to stay calm." "I am calm," Margaret said, though she gripped the bedpost tightly through a contraction. "You are the one who needs to breathe." Nathan would have laughed if he were not so terrified. He ran to the bunkhouse and roused Pete, who immediately saddled up and rode hard for town. Nathan returned to Margaret, who had gotten herself dressed in a loose nightgown and was walking slowly around the bedroom. "The midwife told me that moving helps," she explained. "Helps the baby descend." Nathan felt helpless, wanting to do something, anything, to ease her pain. He held her hand through contractions, brought her water when she asked for it, and tried to project a calm he did not feel. Dr. Harrison arrived within 2 hours. Pete, having ridden like the devil, was on his heels. The doctor examined Margaret and pronounced that everything was progressing normally. "First babies tend to take their time," he said. "Could be hours yet. Mr. Jameson, why do not you make yourself useful and boil some water, get clean towels ready?" Nathan was grateful for tasks to occupy his hands and mind. As the morning wore on and Margaret's labor intensified, he marveled at her strength. She walked, she rocked, she breathed through contractions that he could see were excruciating, and she never once complained. Afternoon faded into evening, and still the baby had not come. Dr. Harrison remained calm and reassuring, but Nathan could see the lines of exhaustion deepening on Margaret's face. Between contractions, she rested against him, and he whispered encouragement. "You are doing so well," he murmured. "So strong, so brave, I am in awe of you. Just want to meet our baby," Margaret panted. "Want this to be over." "Soon," Dr. Harrison promised. "I can see the head. Just a little more, Mrs. Jameson, you are almost there." The final stage of labor was intense and primal. Margaret bore down with everything she had, her hand crushing Nathan's as she pushed their child into the world. At 8:47 in the evening, as the sun set over the ranch they had built together, a baby's cry filled the room. "A son," Dr. Harrison announced with a smile. "A healthy baby boy." Nathan felt tears streaming down his face as the doctor cleaned the baby and placed him in Margaret's arms. She looked exhausted and radiant, gazing down at their son with an expression of pure love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around both of them. The baby was perfect, tiny and red-faced with a surprising amount of dark hair. As Nathan watched, the baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching. "What should we name him?" Margaret asked. They had discussed many names over the past months, unable to decide on just one. But looking at his son now, Nathan knew exactly what felt right. Thomas, he said. After my father, but hopefully with a better temperament. Thomas Nathan Jameson. Thomas, Margaret repeated, testing it out. Yes, I like that. Thomas Jameson, welcome to your home. Dr. Harrison finished his examination and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. You did beautifully, Mrs. Jameson. Get some rest now, both of you. The hard work is just beginning. After the doctor left, Pete poked his head in tentatively. Everything all right, boss? Everything is perfect, Nathan said. Come meet Thomas. Pete approached the bed with uncharacteristic shyness, looking down at the baby with a soft expression. Well, would you look at that? Congratulations to you both. He is a fine-looking boy. Thank you, Pete, Margaret said warmly. For everything. We could not run this ranch without you. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Margaret adjusted to life as parents. Thomas was a good baby, alert and curious, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Margaret recovered quickly from the birth, eager to return to her normal activities, though Nathan insisted she take it slow. I did not carry him for 9 months and labor for 12 hours just to have you injure yourself trying to do too much too soon. He scolded gently when he found her trying to lift a heavy basket of washing when Thomas was only 2 weeks old. I am fine, Margaret protested, but she let him take the basket. Truly, Nathan, I feel strong. I believe you, Nathan said, but indulge me, please. Let yourself fully heal before you take on the heavy work again. The mare foaled in late April, producing a beautiful filly with the same dark coat as her mother. Margaret delighted in watching the foal, seeing parallels between the young horse learning to walk and their own son growing stronger each day. Spring turned to summer, and Thomas thrived. He was an easy baby, happy to be carried around in a sling as Margaret worked, watching everything with bright, curious eyes. Nathan found himself utterly besotted with his son, sneaking away from work throughout the day to spend time with his family. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch with Thomas drowsing in Margaret's arms, Pete approached with news. That boundary dispute with the Henderson property has been settled, he reported. The surveyor confirmed our fence line is correct. Henderson finally admitted he was wrong. Good, Nathan said. I am glad it is resolved without more trouble. How are the cattle looking? Strong and healthy, Pete said. Should be a good year for calves, and those horses are turning out even better than we hoped. Word is spreading about the quality of our stock. Jameson Ranch is building a reputation, Margaret said with satisfaction. Just as we planned. As Pete headed back to the bunkhouse, Nathan looked at his wife, his son, his land stretching out before them in the fading light, and felt a contentment so profound, it was almost overwhelming. A year ago, I was the object of mockery, he said quietly. Men were betting I would never find a wife, never have a family. Now look at us. They underestimated you, Margaret said. They did not realize that you are exactly the kind of man a smart woman would want. Hardworking, honest, kind, loyal. Those are not common qualities, Nathan. You should not be surprised that I was willing to travel halfway across the country for the chance at this life with you. I will never stop being grateful that you took that chance, Nathan said. You walked into my life and proved them all wrong. More than that, you made me believe in possibility again. I had given up, Margaret. After Julia left, I convinced myself I was meant to be alone. Then I read your first letter and something in me woke up. Margaret shifted Thomas to one arm so she could take Nathan's hand with the other. We saved each other, I think. I was drowning in a life that did not fit, being diminished by small-minded people. You offered me a partnership, a purpose, a home. We both took a leap of faith, and we caught each other. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Thomas stirred and made a small sound, and Margaret rose to take him inside to bed. "I will be right back," she said, pressing a kiss to Nathan's forehead as she passed. Nathan remained on the porch, reflecting on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. The bet that had seemed so humiliating at the time had pushed him to take a risk he might never have taken otherwise. And that risk had brought him Margaret, had brought him Thomas, had given him a family and a future he had only dared to dream about. When Margaret returned, she settled into the chair beside him with a contented sigh. "He is asleep already. Poor little thing wore himself out watching the chickens this afternoon." "He has your determination," Nathan observed. "Even at 3 months old, you can see he is going to be stubborn." "He comes by it honestly then," Margaret teased. "His father is not exactly known for being flexible." "I prefer to think of it as being steadfast," Nathan countered with mock dignity. They laughed together, the sound drifting across the ranch yard and fading into the night. This, Nathan thought, was what happiness felt like. Not the dramatic highs of first love or the thrill of achievement, but this quiet contentment. The certainty of being exactly where he belonged with exactly the right person. As summer progressed into fall and then winter again, the Jameson family continued to thrive. Thomas grew from an infant into a curious, active baby who wanted to explore everything. Margaret had her hands full keeping him safe while also managing her work on the ranch. Nathan hired another hand to help with the increased workload as their operation expanded. The horse breeding program was proving even more successful than they had hoped, and they sold their first trained horses that fall for excellent prices. "We should celebrate," Margaret said when Nathan came home with the earnings from the sale. "This is a real milestone for the ranch." "What did you have in mind?" Nathan asked. "A party," Margaret said decisively. "Invite our neighbors, our friends from town. Let us show our appreciation for all the support we have received. And frankly, I would like to show off a bit. We have built something worth celebrating." They hosted the party in early November, before the weather turned too cold. They roasted a whole pig, and Margaret baked pies and cakes with help from several of the neighbor women. As the sun set, people gathered in the ranch yard, eating and drinking and dancing to music provided by a fiddler from town. Tom Richardson approached Nathan during the festivities, a cup of punch in his hand. "You have done well for yourself, Jameson. Better than well, if I am being honest. This ranch, your family, it is all damned impressive." "Thank you, Tom," Nathan said sincerely. "And thank you again for the wedding gift. We put it to good use, as you can see." "Best money I ever lost," Tom said with a grin. "That bet was the stupidest thing we ever did, but it worked out for you in the end. Your wife is a remarkable woman." "She is," Nathan agreed, his eyes finding Margaret across the yard. She was laughing at something Mrs. Dawson had said. Thomas balanced on her hip. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up and smiled at him, a smile full of love and shared understanding. "You know what the real victory is," Tom said thoughtfully. "It is not that you found a wife and won the bet. It is that you found the right wife. A partner who makes you better and who you make better in return. That is rarer than gold, my friend." Nathan raised his cup in acknowledgement. "You are absolutely right. I got far more than I ever expected when Margaret stepped off that train." The party continued late into the evening, with dancing and storytelling, and the kind of easy camaraderie that came from shared experience and mutual respect. When the last guests finally departed and Nathan and Margaret collapsed into bed, exhausted but happy, Margaret snuggled against her husband's side. "That was a good night," she murmured sleepily. "A really good night." "It was," Nathan agreed. "Thank you for suggesting it." It is important to mark the milestones, to acknowledge how far we have come. We have come so far, Margaret said. Sometimes I can hardly believe it has only been a year and a half since I arrived in Montrose. It feels like I have been here forever, like this has always been my life. Because it is your life, Nathan said. It is our life, the one we built together. As winter set in and 1883 drew to a close, the Jameson family settled into their routines. Nathan and Pete managed the winter feeding and care of the animals while Margaret kept the house warm and welcoming, caring for Thomas and maintaining all the small tasks that kept a household running. Thomas's first Christmas was a joyous occasion. At 9 months old, he was fascinated by everything. Grabbing at the evergreen branches Margaret had decorated the house with and laughing at the candlelight. They had invited Pete to join them for Christmas dinner, as had become their tradition, and the old cowhen brought a carved wooden horse for Thomas that the baby immediately tried to eat. "He will appreciate it more when he is older," Margaret said with a laugh, rescuing the toy before it could be gummed to death. "Thank you, Pete. That is very thoughtful." As they sat around the table after dinner, Nathan found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in less than 2 years. He had gone from a lonely rancher facing mockery and doubt to a husband and father, a man with a thriving business and a home full of love. "What are you thinking about?" Margaret asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "Just how grateful I am," Nathan said simply. "For all of this. For you, for Thomas, for the life we have built. 2 years ago, I would not have imagined any of this was possible. 2 years ago, I was teaching ungrateful students and dodging the advances of a married trustee," Margaret said. "Now I am here with you, with our son, building something that matters. We have both come a long way." Spring of 1884 brought new challenges and new joys. 2 of their mares foaled, and they sold several yearlings for good prices. The cattle herd had grown, and Nathan made the decision to purchase additional grazing land to accommodate the expansion. Margaret's garden flourished, and she began selling her cheese and preserves in town, earning her own income that she was fiercely proud of. Thomas took his first steps in April, just after his first birthday. Nathan had been working in the barn when he heard Margaret's excited shout. He ran to the house to find his son wobbling unsteadily between 2 chairs, a look of intense concentration on his small face. "Did you see?" Margaret asked, her face glowing with pride. "He just walked 4 steps." Nathan scooped Thomas up and swung him around, making the boy shriek with laughter. "That is my son. Soon you will be running all over the ranch, won't you?" As predicted, Thomas was soon toddling everywhere, his curiosity boundless and his energy inexhaustible. He followed his father around the ranch like a shadow, wanting to help with everything. Nathan made him a small wooden bucket so he could help feed the chickens, and Margaret sewed him tiny work clothes that were exact replicas of Nathan's. "He worships you," Margaret observed one evening as they watched Thomas play with his toy horses, making them gallop across the floor while he provided sound effects. "The feeling is mutual," Nathan said. "I never knew I could love someone this much. It is terrifying and wonderful at the same time." That summer, Margaret surprised Nathan with news that she was pregnant again. Thomas was only 16 months old, and Nathan worried about her managing 2 young children while still helping with the ranch. "We will figure it out," Margaret assured him. "Women have been raising multiple children since the beginning of time. Besides, I want our children close in age. They will be playmates and companions for each other." This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Margaret knew what to expect. She continued her work throughout the fall, finally slowing down only in the last month before her due date. Thomas was fascinated by his mother's growing belly, patting it gently and talking to the baby inside. In February of 1885, Margaret gave birth to a daughter after a much shorter labor than she had experienced with Thomas. The baby girl was born at dawn, her lusty cries announcing her arrival to the world. "A daughter," Nathan said in wonder, cradling the tiny bundle. "We have a daughter." "What should we name her?" Margaret asked, tired but radiant. "What about Sarah?" Nathan suggested. "After your mother," Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "She would have loved that, Sarah Rose Jameson. It is perfect." Sarah was a more demanding baby than Thomas had been, colicky and fussy, keeping them up at all hours. But she was also affectionate and social, smiling early and charming everyone who met her. Thomas was initially jealous of the attention the baby received, but he quickly became protective of his little sister, always wanting to help care for her. As the children grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Nathan's reputation as a horse breeder grew throughout Colorado, and they began receiving orders from as far away as Wyoming and New Mexico. Margaret's cheese and preserves were in high demand in Montrose, and she had hired a local girl to help with the production so she could keep up with orders. In the fall of 1886, Nathan purchased the adjacent property when the owner decided to retire and move to California. This doubled the size of their ranch and allowed for significant expansion of both their cattle and horse operations. "We are building an empire," Margaret said with satisfaction as they surveyed their enlarged property. "Our children will inherit something substantial." "Our children and their children," Nathan agreed. "This is a legacy, Margaret, something that will last beyond us." They hired 2 more full-time hands to help manage the larger operation, and Nathan promoted Pete to ranch manager, a role he had essentially been filling for years anyway. The additional help allowed Nathan more time with his family, which he treasured. He taught Thomas to ride when the boy was 4, starting him on a gentle pony and gradually progressing to larger horses. Sarah followed her brother everywhere, demanding her own pony when she was barely 3. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Thomas turned 7, then 8, a serious boy who loved the ranch and was already proving himself a capable horseman. Sarah was 6, spirited and bold, afraid of nothing and determined to do everything her older brother could do. In the spring of 1889, Margaret discovered she was pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. At 33, she had assumed her child-bearing years were behind her, but life had other plans. "Another baby," Nathan said, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "At our age." "We are not ancient," Margaret protested with a laugh. "Plenty of women have babies in their 30s. Besides, maybe this one will be a calming influence. Thomas is so serious and Sarah is so wild. Perhaps we will get a peaceful child this time." Nathan kissed her softly. "Or we will get another handful. Either way, I am happy. Our family grows." This third pregnancy was the hardest yet, with Margaret experiencing more discomfort and fatigue than she had with the previous 2. Nathan insisted she rest more, taking over many of her tasks despite her protests. "You have already given me 2 beautiful children and helped build this ranch into everything it is," he said firmly. "Let me take care of you for a change." In November of 1889, Margaret gave birth to another son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were some tense moments when Dr. Harrison looked concerned, but both mother and baby pulled through. The boy was smaller than his siblings had been, but healthy and strong. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked as they lay together in bed, the baby nursing contentedly. "What about Peter?" Margaret suggested. "After Pete. He has been with us from the beginning and he is practically family." "Pete would be honored," Nathan said. "Peter James Jameson. I like it. When they told Pete about the baby's name, the tough old cowhand actually teared up. "You want to name your son after me?" "You have earned it," Nathan said simply. "You have been loyal and true for over a decade, Pete. You are family." As the 1880s gave way to a new decade, the Jameson family continued to flourish. Thomas was 10 years old and already taking on real responsibilities around the ranch. Sarah at 8 was fearless, riding like she was born in the saddle and helping her mother with the cheese making. Little Peter, nearly a year old, was a happy, easy baby who seemed content to watch the world from his mother's arms. The ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the region. They ran over 1,000 head of cattle and had established a horse breeding program that was known throughout the western states. The original ranch house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, and they had built a new barn and several additional outbuildings. One evening in the summer of 1890, as Nathan and Margaret sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land, Margaret leaned against her husband's shoulder with a contented sigh. "You remember that first evening when we sat here together before we were married?" she asked. "I remember," Nathan said. "I was terrified you would change your mind, decide this life was not for you." "I knew even then," Margaret confessed. "I knew this was where I was meant to be, that you were who I was meant to be with. Something just clicked into place when I arrived here." "Best day of my life when you stepped off that train," Nathan said. "Well, that and the births of our children. But you started it all, Margaret. You took a chance on a rancher you had never met, on a life you could only imagine. You are the bravest person I know." "We were both brave," Margaret corrected. "You were brave enough to reach out when you had been hurt before, brave enough to be honest about what you wanted. That takes courage too." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Through the open window behind them, they could hear Thomas reading to his younger siblings, his voice patient as he helped Sarah sound out difficult words. "We did it," Nathan said softly. "We built exactly what we both dreamed of, a family, a legacy, a life of purpose and meaning." "We did," Margaret agreed, "and we will keep building it together for the rest of our lives." Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Together," he echoed, "always together." As the stars emerged overhead, and the cool evening breeze rustled through the cottonwood trees they had planted their first year together, Nathan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A drunken bet, a desperate advertisement, a woman brave enough to cross half the country for a chance at something better. All of it had led to this, to a life richer and fuller than he could have ever imagined. Margaret had walked into his life and proved everyone wrong. She had not just helped him win a bet, she had helped him build a future. Together they had created something that would outlast them both, a legacy of hard work and love that would continue through their children and their children's children. The ranch would endure, the land would provide, and the love they had built together would echo through the generations. It had all started with a simple wager, and a woman brave enough to answer an advertisement from a stranger. Now, 8 years later, Nathan could not imagine his life any other way. He had found his partner, his love, his home. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he would spend the rest of his days grateful for the moment Margaret Rose stepped off that train and into his heart. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Thomas grew into a young man, taking on more and more responsibility until, at 18, he was essentially running the day-to-day operations of the horse breeding program. He had inherited his father's steady temperament and his mother's intelligence, and he showed real promise as a businessman. Sarah, at 16, was a force of nature. She could outride most of the ranch hands and had a gift for training difficult horses. She had also inherited her mother's entrepreneurial spirit and was already talking about expanding their cheese and preserves operation into a full commercial venture. Peter, now 8 years old, was the quiet one of the family, more interested in books and learning than ranching. Margaret had been teaching him herself, supplementing the basic education available at the small schoolhouse in Montrose. He reminded Nathan of Margaret in her teaching days, always curious, always asking questions. In 1897, Nathan and Margaret celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a large party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the region to celebrate with them, a testament to the respect and affection the Jameson family had earned in the community. As Nathan stood with his arm around his wife, watching their children laugh and dance with their friends, he felt the weight of contentment settle over him. They had built something extraordinary together, not just a successful ranch but a real family, a home filled with love and purpose. Tom Richardson approached them, his own hair now completely gray, his grandchildren chasing each other around the yard. 15 years, he said with a shake of his head. I still cannot believe I bet against you, Nathan. Dumbest wager I ever made. Best thing that ever happened to me, Nathan replied, pulling Margaret closer. That bet pushed me to take a risk I might never have taken otherwise, and that risk brought me everything I have now. We were all fools that night in the saloon, Tom admitted. But sometimes good things come from foolish beginnings. You two have shown us all what a real partnership looks like. Your ranch, your family, it is all a testament to what two people can build when they work together. After the guests departed and the children were finally asleep, Nathan and Margaret walked out to look at the ranch in the moonlight. The original house had been expanded into a substantial home. The barns and outbuildings spread across the property in neat order. Fences stretched across pastures where cattle and horses grazed in the darkness. 15 years, Margaret said softly. It feels like a lifetime and like no time at all. We have lived a lot of life in 15 years, Nathan observed. Built a ranch, raised 3 children, created something that will last. Do you ever think about that first day? Margaret asked. When I stepped off the train and we met for the first time. Often, Nathan admitted. I think about how nervous I was, how afraid you would be disappointed. I think about how beautiful you looked, how brave you were to come all this way based on a few letters. I think about how kind your eyes were, Margaret said. How you looked at me like I was already precious to you, even though we had just met. I knew in that moment that I had made the right choice. Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The moonlight silvered her hair, which now had streaks of gray threading through the brown. Lines had appeared at the corners of her eyes and mouth, marks of a life lived with laughter and hard work. To Nathan, she had never been more beautiful. I love you, Margaret Jameson, he said. More today than the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. You are everything I never knew I needed. And you are my home, Margaret replied, her eyes shining with tears. My partner, my love, my best friend. These 15 years have been the best of my life, and I look forward to every year we have ahead of us. They kissed in the moonlight, a kiss full of history and promise, the kind of kiss that only comes from years of partnership and deep abiding love. When they parted, they stood together looking out over their land, content in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. The years ahead would bring more challenges and more joys. They would see their children grow and marry and have children of their own. They would face droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations, and the changing economy as the Old West gave way to the new century. But through it all, they would face it together, just as they had promised that day in May when they stood before Reverend Matthews and pledged their lives to each other. Margaret had walked into Nathan's life and proved all the doubters wrong. She had shown that love could be found in unexpected places, that partnerships built on honesty and respect could flourish into something beautiful. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, written into the land itself and carried forward by the children they had raised with love and purpose. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Nathan felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. A foolish bet, a risky advertisement, a brave woman willing to take a chance. All of it had combined to create the life he had always wanted, but never dared believe he could have. The Jameson Ranch stood as proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings, and that love, when built on a foundation of partnership and respect, could weather any storm and grow stronger with each passing year. And as Nathan and Margaret climbed the porch steps and entered their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, they knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice that day in May of 1882, when they chose each other. The story could have ended there, with that perfect moment of reflection and contentment. But life, as Nathan and Margaret well knew, was not a story with a neat ending. It continued to unfold, season after season, year after year, bringing new chapters and new adventures. In 1899, Thomas married a young woman named Elizabeth from Denver, whom he had met at a horse auction. The wedding was held at the ranch, and Margaret cried happy tears as she watched her firstborn take his vows. Thomas and Elizabeth settled in a house Nathan had built for them on the far side of the ranch property, and Thomas continued to manage the horse breeding program, while Elizabeth proved herself an invaluable addition to the family business, keeping meticulous records and handling much of the correspondence with buyers. Sarah, true to her independent spirit, shocked everyone by announcing at age 19 that she intended to attend college in Denver. "I want to learn proper business management," she declared. "If we are going to expand the cheese and preserves operation the way I envision, I need to understand accounting and marketing." Nathan and Margaret supported her decision, though they worried about their daughter in the city. But Sarah thrived, returning after 2 years with a head full of ideas and a business plan that impressed even Pete, who was usually skeptical of newfangled notions. Peter, at 16, announced his intention to become a teacher. "I know the ranch needs me," he said earnestly to his parents. "But I do not have the passion for it that Thomas and Sarah do. I want to teach, like you did, Mother. I want to help children learn and grow." Margaret embraced her youngest son with tears in her eyes. "You follow your heart, Peter. Your father and I did not build this ranch so our children would feel trapped by it. We built it so you would have choices, opportunities. If teaching is your calling, then teach with our blessing." As the new century dawned in 1900, Nathan and Margaret found themselves entering a new phase of life. At 47 and 44, respectively, they were no longer young, but neither were they old. The ranch was well established and largely managed by Thomas and the capable crew of ranch hands they had built over the years. This gave Nathan and Margaret more time for themselves, for each other. They took long rides together through their property, rediscovering the joy of each other's company without the constant demands of young children. They sat together in the evenings reading, discussing the books they both loved. They made love with the comfortable passion of longtime partners who knew each other's bodies and hearts intimately. In 1902, Thomas and Elizabeth made Nathan and Margaret grandparents for the first time with the birth of their son, whom they named Nathan James Jameson in honor of his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Nathan felt the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. "This is what it was all for," he said to Margaret as they watched Thomas teach little Nathan to pet a gentle horse, "building something that would continue beyond us." "We have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams," Margaret agreed. "Look at what we created, Nathan. Not just this ranch, but this family. Our children are good people making their own marks on the world. That is our real legacy." Sarah returned to the ranch in 1903 after finishing her studies and immediately began implementing her business plans. Within 2 years, Jameson Ranch Preserves was being sold in stores throughout Colorado, and Sarah was fielding inquiries from merchants in Wyoming and New Mexico. Her fierce determination and business acumen reminded Nathan so much of Margaret that it made his heart swell with pride. Peter, true to his word, attended Teachers College and returned to Montrose in 1905 to teach at the local school. The town had grown significantly over the years, and the school had expanded to accommodate more students. Peter proved to be a gifted teacher, patient and inspiring, carrying on his mother's legacy in his own way. In 1907, on their 25th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Margaret renewed their vows in a simple ceremony at the ranch. All 3 of their children were there, along with grandchildren. Thomas and Elizabeth now had 3 children, and Sarah had married and had her first child the year before. Friends, neighbors, and ranch hands past and present. Pete, now in his 70s and officially retired though he still lived on the ranch and could not resist occasionally offering advice, served as Nathan's best man again. Mrs. Dawson, still spry at 82, stood with Margaret just as she had 25 years earlier. As Nathan and Margaret exchanged new vows, promising to continue loving each other through whatever years they had remaining, there was not a dry eye among the witnesses. Their love story had become the stuff of local legend, the mail-order bride and the rancher who proved everyone wrong, building not just a successful ranch but a genuine partnership that had stood the test of time. That evening, as the celebration wound down and the stars came out, Nathan and Margaret found themselves alone on the porch once more, sitting in the same chairs they had occupied on so many evenings over the past 25 years. "We have had a good life," Margaret said softly. "The best life," Nathan corrected. "Better than I ever imagined possible. You know, sometimes I still cannot quite believe you are real, that all of this is real. It feels too good to be true." "It is real," Margaret assured him, taking his hand. "All of it. Every moment, every challenge, every triumph. We built this together, and it is as real and solid as this land beneath our feet." 25 years, Nathan marveled, "and I love you more today than ever before." "And I love you," Margaret said. "You are my greatest adventure, Nathan Jameson. Everything else, the ranch, the children, the life we built, it all stems from choosing you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Thomas's house in the distance, knowing that Sarah's home beyond the hill was also glowing with lamplight, that Peter was probably still awake in town grading papers. Their family had grown and spread, but the roots remained here, in this place they had built together. The years continued to pass with increasing speed, the way they do as one ages. Nathan's hair turned completely gray, and he developed a limp from an old riding accident that never quite healed properly. Margaret's hands became gnarled with arthritis, making the fine sewing she once enjoyed more difficult. But they aged together, supporting each other through the indignities and challenges that came with growing older. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management. Sarah's business expanded into a significant operation that employed several women from town. Peter became the headmaster of the Montrose School and was known throughout the region as an innovative and compassionate educator. Grandchildren came in abundance. Thomas and Elizabeth eventually had 5 children. Sarah and her husband had 4. Even Peter, who married later in life to a fellow teacher, had twin daughters. Nathan and Margaret's home became the center of family gatherings, full of noise and laughter and the chaos of multiple generations. In 1915, as Nathan and Margaret approached their 33rd wedding anniversary, Nathan's health began to decline. The doctor diagnosed a weak heart, likely the result of decades of hard physical labor and the natural effects of age. He was 62 years old and had lived a full life, but he was not ready to leave Margaret, not ready to let go of the life they had built. "You are going to be fine," Margaret said firmly, sitting beside his bed and holding his hand. She was 58, her hair completely white now but her spirit as strong as ever. "You are too stubborn to let a weak heart get the better of you." "I am not ready to leave you," Nathan said, his voice weaker than either of them liked. "We have more years ahead of us, Margaret. I promised you forever." "And you will keep that promise," Margaret insisted, though fear flickered in her eyes. "We have grandchildren to spoil and a ranch to oversee. You are not going anywhere." Nathan rallied over the next few weeks, defying the doctor's pessimistic predictions. He could not work the way he once had, but he could still ride slowly around the ranch, still sit on the porch in the evenings with Margaret, still watch his grandchildren play in the yard. On their 33rd anniversary, May 26, 1915, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Nathan insisted on being dressed and brought down to sit in his chair on the porch, determined to be part of the festivities despite his weakness. As the sun set and the family gathered around, Thomas stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They took a chance on each other 33 years ago, 2 strangers who became partners and then lovers, and then the foundation of this entire family. Everything we have, everything we are, stems from their courage and their love. To Nathan and Margaret Jameson. To Nathan and Margaret. Everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Nathan looked around at the gathered faces, his children and their spouses, his grandchildren ranging from babies to young adults. Pete still hanging on at 78 and refusing to miss the celebration. This was his legacy. All these lives touched and shaped by the choice he and Margaret had made to take a chance on each other. "I want to say something," Nathan said, his voice quiet but steady. Everyone fell silent, leaning in to hear. 33 years ago, a group of men made a bet that I could not find a wife. They thought I was too serious, too focused on my work, too set in my ways. They were probably right about all of that, but they underestimated one thing. They underestimated that somewhere out there was a woman brave enough and strong enough to see past my flaws to the man I wanted to be." He looked at Margaret, his eyes full of love. "Margaret, you walked into my life and proved them all wrong. But more than that, you showed me what life could be when shared with the right partner. You gave me this family, this legacy, this beautiful life. I thank God every day for that bet, for those letters, for the moment you stepped off that train and into my heart. Everything good in my life stems from you." There was not a dry eye in the gathering. Margaret leaned down and kissed her husband gently. "And you gave me a home, a purpose, a family of my own. We saved each other, Nathan. We built this together." The celebration continued late into the evening, but Nathan tired quickly and Margaret helped him back to bed. As she tucked him in, he caught her hand. "I mean it, Margaret, every word. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Rest now," Margaret said softly. "We have more anniversaries ahead of us. This is not goodbye." "Not goodbye," Nathan agreed. "Never goodbye." But as the weeks passed, it became clear that Nathan's time was limited. His heart continued to weaken, and there were days when he could barely get out of bed. Margaret refused to leave his side. sleeping in a chair next to their bed, tending to him with the same dedication she had brought to everything in their life together. On a warm July evening, with the windows open and the sound of crickets drifting in from outside, Nathan opened his eyes and looked at Margaret with sudden clarity. "It has been a good life," he said. "The best life," Margaret agreed, though tears streamed down her face. They both knew that the end was near. "I am not afraid," Nathan said. "How can I be afraid when I have lived such a full life? When I have been so deeply loved, I am afraid," Margaret admitted. "I am afraid of being without you." "You will never be without me," Nathan assured her. "I am in this ranch, in our children, in every sunset over these mountains. I am in the legacy we built together. You will feel me here, Margaret, always." She crawled into bed beside him, holding him gently. "I love you, Nathan Jameson. I have loved you from the moment I read your first letter. And I love you, Margaret. My brave, beautiful Margaret, who took a chance on a lonely rancher and changed his entire world." They fell asleep together as they had for 33 years, wrapped in each other's arms. When Margaret woke at dawn, Nathan was gone, his expression peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that threatened to drown her. But Margaret was strong, forged by decades of hard work and partnership. She had promised Nathan they would build a legacy, and she would honor that promise. The funeral was held at the ranch, with seemingly half of Colorado in attendance. Nathan had been respected and loved, and people came from all over to pay their respects. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, the spot he had always said had the best view of the valley. In the months that followed, Margaret found her way through grief one day at a time. Her children supported her, her grandchildren brought joy and distraction, and the ranch itself gave her purpose. She threw herself into work, helping Sarah expand the preserve's business, spending time with the horses Nathan had loved, maintaining the home they had built together. She lived another 12 years, active and engaged until the very end. She saw more grandchildren born, saw Thomas's oldest son take over management of the ranch, saw Peter's daughters graduate from college and become teachers themselves. She continued to be the heart of the family, the matriarch who held everyone together. On May 26, 1927, the 45th anniversary of her wedding day, Margaret gathered her family around her. She was 70 years old and had been feeling her strength waning over the past months. She knew, as Nathan had known, that her time was drawing to a close. "I want you all to know," she said, looking around at the beloved faces of her children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, "that I have lived the most extraordinary life. Your grandfather and I built something beautiful together, and seeing it continue through all of you fills me with more joy than I can express." "Mother, do not talk like that," Sarah said, though her voice was thick with tears. "You will be with us for many more years." Margaret smiled gently. "I have lived a full and happy life. I am not afraid of what comes next. I am only grateful for what has been." That night, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Nathan for so many years. Her children found her in the morning, a peaceful smile on her face, the wedding photograph of her and Nathan clutched in her hand. They buried her next to Nathan on the hill, and the entire town of Montrose came to pay their respects to the woman who had arrived as a mail-order bride and become one of the most respected and beloved members of the community. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations just as Nathan and Margaret had envisioned. The story of how they met, of the bet that had brought them together, became a cherished family legend, told and retold to each new generation. 100 years after Margaret stepped off that train in Montrose, the Jameson Ranch was still operating, still thriving, a testament to the love and partnership of two people who had taken a chance on each other. The original ranch house had been preserved and expanded, turned into a museum of sorts that told the story of Nathan and Margaret's remarkable life together. Visitors could see the letters they had exchanged before meeting, carefully preserved in frames. They could read about the bet that had started it all, about Margaret's brave decision to travel across the country for a chance at a new life. They could see photographs documenting the growth of the ranch and the family, evidence of a legacy built on love and hard work. But more than the physical legacy, more than the land or the buildings or the successful businesses, Nathan and Margaret's true legacy lived on in the values they had instilled in their children and their children's children. The importance of partnership and respect in marriage. The value of hard work and integrity. The courage to take risks in pursuit of something better. The understanding that real wealth is measured not in acres or dollars, but in the love and connections we build with others. Their story became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings, that love can be found in unexpected places, and that two people, working together with dedication and respect, can build something that lasts far beyond their own lifetimes. Nathan Jameson had been a lonely rancher who accepted a foolish bet. Margaret Rose had been a schoolteacher looking for a new beginning. Together, they had proven everyone wrong, building not just a successful ranch but a love story for the ages, a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. And on quiet evenings, when the setting sun painted the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and pink, some said you could still feel their presence on that porch, two souls forever intertwined, watching over the legacy they had built together with such care and love.